Welcome to the Orthocast. Today our guest is Rachel Wilson. She's an author, a mother, and also a debater. She debates lots of important cultural issues, especially on masculinity, femininity, on whatever podcast, on modern day debate, and on the Crucible. She's actually the wife of Andrew Wilson, who I think is one of the best blood sports debaters out there, and he's exploded in popularity lately. So thank you so much for coming on. I'm really excited for this conversation.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm a big fan of your channel. I think you've been doing some really great videos that I love to watch, so I'm super happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you. So my first question for you is, what was your upbringing like? Were you raised Christian? Did you ever fall away?
Yeah, I was raised Christian. My parents, I was kind of an oops baby. My parents weren't married when they had me. I don't think they planned to get married, but my dad's story is that when I was born and he saw me, that was it for him, and he just wanted to stick around and be my dad, which I am eternally
Oh,
thankful for.
wow.
Yeah, so my parents did get married, and I feel like they tried to, do what their parents did and raise a traditional, like, small town family in the church. My dad, um, followed like his tradition. So my mom was Roman Catholic.
Mm.
My dad was a Reformed Protestant.
Okay.
And so my dad wanted to follow the Reformed path, and he ended up
Mhm.
being a deacon in the church that we went to
Oh, wow.
for a while. Yeah. So he tried his best with it, but I mean, my mother did not make it easy. But
Mm-hmm.
also, in her defense, coming from a Roman Catholic background and then learning Reformed theology, she was like, "This is nonsense," right? She was just like, she's
Yeah.
a very smart lady, and I think she saw all the contradictions and she could not reconcile them. So she just kind of left the church
Wow.
and divorced my dad.
Oh, no. Oh, my.
And when that happened, yeah, when that happened, the church told my dad, "Well, if you're divorced, you can't be a deacon." And it wasn't his choice. He did not want her to leave. She kind of gave him no choice.
Wow.
So he felt very betrayed. He felt really betrayed by the church and kind of fell away from
Oh,
the faith. Now, I was really lucky because I was in junior high at this time and I had friends that also went to church,
yeah.
and they started bringing me to church with them.
That's good.
So I got in with a really good youth group. It was like a Protestant, like, it was reformed, but it was much looser than the church I grew up in, which was
Yeah.
very strict, like Dutch reformed.
Okay.
So this church I went to, yeah, this church I went to in junior high and high school, it was more modern. It was less strict, but it did have a solid youth group, and I
Mm-hmm.
do think that that kept me out of a lot of trouble and helped keep me on a good path. I can really see how, like, with my family background, I could have really gone crazy
Yeah.
as a teenager.
Yeah.
Especially because both of my parents went through this, like, atheist phase at this time, and I was the only person in my family going
Wow.
to church.
Wow.
So, and my parents were fine with it, but they just both had such a sour attitude toward Christianity at that point that they were kinda indifferent. They were like, "Well, if you wanna go, you can go," but, they weren't into it. So that was kinda tough, but I mean, I remember in junior high reading my Bible every night, praying every night, and I've done that as long as I can remember.
Mm-hmm.
So, I wouldn't say I ever had a point where I fell away from the faith, but I would say I fell into a really false faith. So, like, after high school,
Mm-hmm.
I go out into the world and I'm trying to find a church because I moved, and I find one of these, like, non-denominational mega
Yeah.
churches. Very, very so I'm getting, like, more and more modern and less Christian as I'm getting older, with the churches I'm going to, and I just didn't really know anything about theology.
Yeah.
I was doing what I think most women do, which is you're paying more attention to the social aspects of the church and the
Yeah.
group and the community.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that was honestly really detrimental to me because I was surrounded
Yeah.
by people who said, "We're Christian, we believe the faith," but also they were fine with things like, "Oh, you can live with your boyfriend when you're not married. And getting married's just like a nice bonus. It's a piece of paper. It's not
Yeah.
super important. At least you're being monogamous." And I kind of believed that. And it did not work out for me. We'll
Yeah.
just put it that way. It really put me on a wrong path.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's been like a long, winding road for me to find the Orthodox Church, which only happened about 3.5 years ago now.
Wow.
So, right around when the pandemic happened and the lockdowns,
Mm-hmm.
I had found my way at least back to a more traditional Protestant church,
Yeah.
which in the area I'm in Western Michigan, which is very reformed. It's like the reformed capital of the world over here. So there are at least some more traditional Protestant churches, and I had found one and I thought it was fairly solid. But right before the lockdowns, I wanted to get into theology. I wanted to understand, like, how do I interpret the Bible that I'm reading? How do I know what, because by this time I had been exposed to lots of different interpretations, and I'm like, how do we know which one
Yeah.
is correct? Because we all disagree.
Yeah.
So I wanted to figure this out. And I attended like a meeting with, people on Sunday night with the pastor and the deacons who are explaining, they were doing end times theology on this particular Sunday.
Oh my god.
And they started explaining dispensationalism to me. And I thought, I think I got to take a look around because this could be wrong. It just, like, something in me
Yeah.
logically, rationally, I felt it was very off.
Mhm.
And when I had questions, they couldn't really explain it. It was just like, this is just the way it is. And I was like, oh,
Oh
okay.
no.
So then right after that, I said a prayer that night, basically asking God, like, help me figure out what church I should be in. Help me figure
Mhm.
out how to worship properly because I want to do that. I want to make sure I'm on the right path. And
Yeah.
then lockdowns happened like that same
Oh,
week.
yeah.
All the churches shut down. So my church shut down and it was like, okay, I guess this is a good time to dig in.
Mhm.
At the same time, I do think this is providence, by the way. I don't think all these things happening at the
Yeah.
same time are
Yeah.
super coincidental.
Yeah.
Same time, I had a friend, like a Twitter mutual friend, message me because I had been talking to him about this, and
Mhm.
he had just converted recently, and he's like, "Rach, you got to listen to this Jay Dyer guy. I think that you would.
Yeah.
I think he's right up your alley. I think you would really like his stuff." So I'm like, "Okay, we'll give this guy a shot." So I listened to one of his debates against a Protestant, and I
Mhm.
always tell this story because I can remember it clear as day. I'm sitting there doing my nails like a lady would do, and Andrew's sitting like in the other room, but he can hear me and stuff. And I'm listening on my earbuds while I'm doing my nails as this debate's going on. And Jay is just crushing the Protestant,
Yeah.
just absolutely blowing him out of the water and
Mhm.
poking holes in all of the inconsistencies and the problems. And I'm sitting there and I'm going, crap. And then I'd listen a little longer and then I'd be like, damn it. And my husband goes, what's going on in there? What are you in there,
Yeah.
fussing about? And I said, I think we're in the wrong church. And he was like, okay. So like late, after I
Yeah.
had done more reading, I brought it to Andrew and because he had the similar
Mhm.
raising to me where it was just like non-denominational Protestantism. We're
Mhm.
like nominally and culturally Christian. We read the Bible and we pray. We go to
Yeah.
church a few times a year, and that's about it.
Mhm.
But he was kind of in the same headspace as me where he wanted to figure this out too. And I'm like, did you know that there was like one church for the first 1,000 years? And it
Yeah.
was nothing like any of these churches that we've gone to. And he's like, how did we not know this?
Yeah.
How did we know until we're 40 years old and we didn't
Yeah.
know, we didn't ever even think about what was Christianity for the first 100,
Yeah.
300,000 years, all the church history stuff. And, we're nerds. We're supposed to be curious about this stuff.
Yeah.
So we were just shocked at our own ignorance. So of course, then it's like, well, we got to get into this and start learning and reading and listening to some things.
Yeah.
And once you do that, in my opinion, it's kind of over.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
definitely. It is. So, was that
yeah,
hard during the pandemic? Is like learning about this great Orthodox theology? And I agree with you. Like once you hear it, it makes sense, especially from a Protestant background. It's like, oh, this is it. This is learning about
yeah,
the first 1,000 years and everything. So,
yeah.
yeah, how was your pandemic experience of like inquiring?
It was oddly really good
Yeah.
because I think we weren't alone.
Hmm.
And I saw that there were some people that were still, there were a few Orthodox churches that were closing and stuff, but
Hmm.
luckily the ones that were close to us were not.
Awesome.
The one that we started inquiring at has a really experienced, really fantastic priest, and he was really good about handling it like
Yeah.
diplomatically because it's a very large church and it does have some liberal folks in it
Hmm.
who
Yeah.
wanted the lockdown measures. And his answer to them was, I will rope off this little area of pews over here because we do
Yeah.
have pews in our church. We stand, but there's some pews.
Yeah.
He said, I'll rope off this little area, and if you're concerned, you can go there,
Hmm.
right? But for the
Yeah.
rest of us, we're not going to change the spoons at communion. We're not
Yeah.
going to stop kissing the icons. We're not going to stop venerating. But if you're concerned, there's a spot for you. So you can still come and you can still be here.
Yeah.
And I'm sure he got pushback.
Mhm.
But he was like really firm, and he had a really, really good way of kind of defending his choice there and explaining
Yeah.
it. And so that was like really heartening to see. And
Mhm.
the whole clergy at that church was super good, because this is a really large church that has probably, I'd say, half Middle Eastern folks, because it's Antiochian, and then the
Mhm.
other half is all Dutch Protestant converts like myself.
Wow.
And so they were really, really good at handling like inquirers and taking in catechumens. And, he was not a priest that just baptized you 6 months or 9 months in. He was
Mhm.
like, look, this is serious business. And I like to see people do at least a full liturgical year.
Yeah.
And then, like, ideally, I like a 3-year catechism. He's like, I know it's a little long. Some people don't really like it. But he said, in his experience, the 3-year mark is about where, if people are going to fall off, that's about where they fall off in his experience. That made sense to us. So we did have a longer catechism, which
Mhm.
now in hindsight, we're glad for. We were just
Yeah.
baptized this last February.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
actually the traditional way. I think in the Didache it talks
Hmm.
about the 3-year catechesis process. And it's really
Yeah.
interesting during the pandemic is the most traditional churches grew the most because they were the only ones that were open. So
Yeah.
how was it going to, divine liturgy for the first time? Did it feel very foreign? Did it feel like, this is kind of weird, or did it feel like it was home?
For us, for Andrew and I personally,
Hmm.
it was instant home. I
Yeah.
know that wasn't the case for a lot of my friends and
Hmm.
for a lot of converts who are like, maybe just very comfortable with more American Western style Christianity. But like Andrew, I could never get Andrew to go to a Protestant church because there's
Yeah.
if you guys know Andrew, this will make sense.
Yeah.
All of the like the praise and worship
Yeah.
stuff, and it's very feminized, and
Yeah.
he said it always felt very unserious to him.
Yes,
He just
exactly.
felt like it was very performative, and it was very unserious, and not he loved like the first divine liturgy we went to. It was probably 10 minutes in, and he just kind of looks over at me and gives me this little nod. He's like, because he was like, to me, this is how you worship God.
Yeah.
He instantly felt like this is the way that you should worship God. It's so reverential. It's
Yeah.
so sim uh everything is so symbolic and so meaningful. And it just really felt like home to both of us right away. We didn't need a lot of convincing. It was like what we had been looking for. It's like we felt like there's
Yeah.
an authentic Christianity out there somewhere. And it was like, well, we asked God to show it to us. So should we be surprised that we found it?
Yeah. That's exactly what I feel. It's like going to any Protestant service is just completely unserious. It's just like a rock concert and a TED talk versus this very
Right.
serious. I mean, you could just feel the reverence. You can smell the incense and the chants. Like they really they move your heart. That's why I tell people just go to church. That's the best thing. And meeting like minded people. Being welcomed in by other converts. It's such an amazing experience, and it's the only
Yeah.
Christianity that isn't feminized. It has the proper place
Right.
for men and women, and that goes into my next topic that I wanted to ask you is in our culture we see a lot of people reacting to radical feminists, and you and Andrew kind of debate with the Manosphere people and with like the feminists and everything, and a lot of them are missing kind of this Christian perspective, like authentically Christian
Yeah.
perspective, because Western Christianity is so feminized. So what would you say about what do you think like the Manosphere gets right and what they get wrong, and like what would you say to that?
Yeah. So, well, this is the thing with it. It's a very dialectical place,
Yeah.
right? The internet in general, but
Hmm.
especially this sphere where you've got like liberal progressive feminists over here, and then you've got red pill and MGTOW guys and the Andrew
Yeah.
Tate fans over here.
Hmm.
And they're so diametrically opposed that they're not that there has to be middle ground necessarily. I'm not trying to say that, but it's just like what I feel like the feminists and the progressives have this like they create this whole ought system of the world ought be like this, everything ought to be fair, everything ought to be
Yeah.
equal, everything should be. They have this like very idealistic version of the world that they think no matter how many people are crushed under the boot heels of us
Yeah.
pursuing this idealism, we have to do it, right? And if you
Exactly.
don't, you're evil, you're bad, you're mean,
Hmm.
you're toxic. And
Yeah.
then you've got the other side, the red pill MGTOW stuff is reactionary to that. And
Yeah.
so what they have is lots of good descriptors. They're
Hmm.
very good at describing the problems with feminism, the problems with modernity, the issues that we see in people being able to find mates, being able to stay married or even get married,
Yeah.
right? And all of the issues, they're pretty good at describing
Hmm.
like here's how things have gone wrong and here's what's happened in the pickle that we're in,
Yeah.
but they don't want to give you any prescriptions.
Yeah.
They don't, it doesn't give you a worldview. It doesn't
Exactly.
give you any way to navigate. Okay, we know these are the things that are happening, but what should we do about it?
Hmm.
How ought things be? If we don't think it should be the feminist utopia world, what is it that we're looking for? And they kind of just say, well, we're giving you a bunch of tools and it's up to you what you do with the tools. And it's
Yeah.
like, so a lot of people will find red pill content and they'll find some truth in it.
Hmm.
And they'll say, yeah, I kind of agree with you that this extreme feminism stuff is bad. But what do I do now? Like, what do I do about like finding a wife? What if I want to have a family? Like, what am I
Yeah.
supposed, they have nowhere to go with it. So I think what happens is they'll see, some of Andrew's content where he navigates both of these worlds really well and
Yeah.
he can pin either side completely on where they're inconsistent and where they go wrong and then point them toward orthodoxy. Now he's really, firm and upfront about the fact that he is not ministering.
Yeah.
He does not have an orthodox ministry. He's like, I'm an orthodox Christian guy
Hmm.
who's out here doing this. So he always will point people. He'll say, go to Kyle's channel, go to Jay's channel, go to the Orthodox Discord, ask for
Yeah.
Chase Haggard. He'll point you towards people
Yeah.
that are qualified to
Yeah.
answer your questions, point you in the right direction. He'll tell people, go to a church, talk to the clergy. So he's really upfront about the fact that he's not ministering, but he is really good at taking people who are part of the real world out there, the current culture, which is totally screwed up, and they're lost. And they're like, I know this is wrong, but I don't know where to go or what to do about it.
Yeah.
And he's like a giant neon sign just pointing people to the church, which I
Yeah.
think is super important. I think that's really important that he's doing that. Because
Yeah.
apologetics isn't for everyone, right?
Hmm.
And so same kind of thing for me. I'm a woman. I'm not authorized to preach or minister or do apologetics.
Hmm.
But when I talk about those subjects on my channel, I always bring on a man who does have a blessing to do that. And then I'll ask questions and we bounce things back and forth. People have probably seen Patrick from Church of the Eternal
Yeah.
Logos. We've done a ton of videos together.
Hmm.
I've had Jay on, I've had David Erhan on, and a bunch of other great guys. Jeem's going to be coming on my channel
Oh,
soon to talk
awesome.
about.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about the woman's Bible, which I'm so excited about. I've been waiting
Uh,
to get into that with him. Um, so that's kind of what we do is like, I know a lot of people really hate these dating podcasts, and I totally
mhm.
understand why you wouldn't want to sit through 6 hours of a whatever podcast. I
Yeah.
understand why you don't want to watch the Fresh and Fit after show. I get it.
Yeah.
However, what I don't want to do is talk to older people who are already orthodox and already agree with me.
Yeah.
They already agree with me. They've already found the path. They're on the royal path. They're doing great. I want to talk to young people who are where I was when I was 19, 20, 21, and I'm just floating in this American Protestant soup where you're just kind of lost and there's no real direction and it's kind of libertarian, do what you want, but
Yeah.
just,
It
pray
is.
and read your Bible and you'll be fine. So I want to talk to those people. I want to get my message out to those people. And sometimes that means arguing and debating with them. It means getting into their worldview, poking all the holes in it, finding all the flaws in it, showing them
Yeah.
where they've gone wrong. And my focus is always history because the
Mhm.
history is completely wrong. It's totally astroturfed. And what everyone believes about the history of women's liberation and the sexual revolution is wrong. And I think a good starting point is once people see that, when I'm able to like walk them through just how badly they've been deceived on that,
Yeah.
they go looking for answers themselves. They're like, "Oh, shoot, if this is all wrong,
Yeah.
I need to go back and reevaluate this. And a lot of times
Yeah.
they'll think I'm kind of crazy and they'll go to fact check me and be like, "Oh shoot, she's right." You know,
Yeah.
and then
Wow.
they're much more likely to listen and look and pay attention and think, "Okay, maybe I should change my thinking. Maybe my worldview does have some problems." So that's kind of what I try to do with
Yeah.
those shows.
I think that's some of the most important work that we can do is reaching people in the culture who they see this crazy left wing ideology that's just totally anti human, and they're reacting, they're
Mhm.
embracing something that the Manosphere gets a lot of things right about, like self improvement and
Yeah,
starting a business and becoming a very like high value guy. But it's like, what is this end really towards? And it ultimately,
right.
that's where voices like you and Andrew and other like Christians who are willing to go and debate and talk about these things with people in the culture, it reels them in. It's a pipeline to being blue pilled and then red pilled. Maybe you go a little bit far and get black pilled, but then ultimately at the end is the Christ pill, and
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
and finding His
Yeah,
church,
if
the
you're
Orthodox
really
Church.
looking for the truth, that's where you'll end up. Yep.
Yeah,
If you're looking for the truth and you're going down that rabbit hole, I feel like that's, of course, that's what I believe, is that that's
yeah,
the end of the rabbit hole, is Christ and his church.
hmm
But yeah, we've got to get people going into the rabbit hole, because right now the culture that we have is deeply materialistic.
hmm
It's completely secular. Even people who call themselves Christian, this is usually like my most viral moments are usually with other women
yeah,
who say, "I'm a Christian woman and I think you're a meanie head and I think that first wave was great and I think women should have their own money and that they don't need to depend on a man, and but
yeah,
I'm Christian and those things are compatible." And when I poke holes in that programming and when I point out all the contradictions for them of thinking that way, it's very emotional. So they usually have a little bit of a meltdown, which I think that's very understandable. Okay. If
yeah.
I was 20-year-old Rach talking to 43-year-old Rach, I'd probably react the same way.
Yeah.
So I try to be like, I have to be firm,
Mhm.
right? I have to be firm. I can't let them get away with nonsense.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes that comes off as like mean, but I'm
Yeah.
not being mean. It's just I really can't do this. Oh, well, if you want to be like, a charismatic Pentecostal Christian feminist, I think that's fine.
Yeah.
You can't let them get away with that. And usually these are panel debates, so
Mhm.
you've got to get in there and you have to
Yeah.
be a little aggressive, and that's just the nature of it. It's a I feel like I have to do it because it's a hard thing to do as a woman, and most women don't want to do it. They don't want anything to do with it.
Yeah.
And my husband was kind of like, "Look, you're uniquely qualified. You kind of have a gift of getting in there and,
Yeah.
breaking people's stuff down quickly." So that's what I try to do. It's not that I'm trying to like dunk on them, be mean to them, shame
Yeah.
them necessarily. Although sometimes I feel like a
Yeah.
little shaming is in order when
Yeah.
when some of these women say crazy things. But what I'm trying to do is quickly break down the worldview so that then I can say, okay, now that you understand how this is so wrong, here's where you can go for a coherent worldview that actually will help you get out of this mess you're in and help you get to somewhere that's going to be good for you and for your life and for your family and for society, and where how we can reverse these things.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. I mean, that's the greatest gift you can give someone is you're coming from a loving place and it is going to be firm. I mean, that's the problem with modernity is everyone's afraid to really be firm when really all these people are on
Yeah.
paths that are ultimately going to lead them to sadness and despair and to lose their soul to face destruction. So yeah, we need
Yeah.
that firmness, and it's coming from a place of love, and that's a hard balancing act. Is like because some of these people are really annoying. They are really bitter about these things, but taking the Christian way, the high like the better path that
Yeah.
we just genuinely care about these people. But
Yeah, I mean, some people are going to strongly dislike me for doing that, and
yeah,
it's hard getting those nasty messages and comments sometimes.
yeah,
But for every mean comment or for every person who calls me something awful or spreads lies and rumors about me, because Lord knows they do that too,
yeah,
I get an astonishing amount of emails, DMs, and even letters in my PO box from women who say, "I read your book or I watched your video. And it blew my mind and it changed my whole way of thinking. And my husband and I are, we're expecting our first baby.
Aw.
I'm going to stay home. I'm going to raise the baby. We're going to stay married. I get it now. And a lot of these women just want to hear another woman say, hey, you don't have to be a career woman to be successful. You
Yeah.
don't have to have a college degree and be a boss and constantly compete with your husband and be, at odds with him. You don't have to bring your kids to daycare for 40 hours a week to be considered like normal.
Mhm.
A lot of the women just want permission and want another woman to say, it's cool to be a mom. It's awesome. It's
It is.
awesome that you decided to stay home. Good for you. Good choice. And that they're doing the right thing and that they don't have to feel ashamed. I get so many women who are like, how do I justify this? My parents say I need to go back to work because it's dangerous for me to rely on my husband's income.
Mhm.
Or, my friends think I'm wasting my talents because I'm just a mom. The same stuff I always heard. And so that's really my favorite thing to do is give those women the courage and the just tell them that it's cool and it's good and that they should feel
Yeah.
good about those choices,
They
you
should. I
know?
mean, there's thousands of other people that are going to tell them the opposite. That's going to lead them down a path where they're going to be sad and miserable, on SSRIs and just not fulfilled in life versus
Yeah,
you.
and with lots of regrets. I mean,
Yeah.
and the more kids that are being raised by married parents who are
Hmm.
actually at home parenting them, like, I don't care about all the people who hate me, all the people that wanna say mean things or get mad at what I say. If there's more kids growing up in intact families in church with their parents around, not being just tossed into a public school for 7 hours a day and then
Yeah.
daycare for another 4 hours a day,
Yeah.
and their parents are divorced, and they're flip-flopping back and forth between mom and dad's house. That's what I went through.
Yeah.
And the less kids that have to experience that growing up, I'm willing to take whatever nasty stuff people wanna throw at me because I think that's super important, and if I can help any families stay together just by telling the wife, "Hey, good for you for being a good wife and mom, and you don't have to feel bad
Yeah.
or like you're missing out on your career or like you're missing out on an education and you never did anything with your life." I'm willing to sacrifice whatever for that.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what we're all called to do as Christians is say unpopular things when we know
Yeah,
it's the truth and we know it's what's best. And
yeah.
that leads into my next question. You talked about your book a little bit. Do you want to talk about that? The occult feminism, kind of the secret history that people don't know about.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So this people always ask like why I wrote the book or how did I end up
Yeah.
getting into all that? And it's basically what I just told you guys. So like here I am, I'm a young adult, I made a lot of mistakes in my 20s. That really I could I had definitely responsibility. I'm not saying I didn't make mistakes or do things I knew I probably shouldn't. I did. Uh, I moved in with my boyfriend right after high school.
Hmm.
But the culture, my family, and even the church I was in at the time all told me, that's fine. At least you're monogamous, at least
Yeah.
and you're gonna get married, right? That was the plan. We're gonna get married. So
Yeah.
really it's no big deal. And I thought, well, I'm not doing what my other friends are doing, which is going to college and going to frat parties. And I had friends that, would go from one guy to the next,
Yeah.
week after week after week, and they're partying and they're drinking. And so I thought, well, I'm being pretty conservative. I'm not
Yeah.
so bad.
Yeah.
Um, until of course that relationship didn't work out and the guy that I was with left. There was no like cheating or nastiness or toxicity. He went through some really intense personal things, and we had a baby that was really young, and I was pregnant again. And that just, any issues he had, it just magnified them times a thousand, and he left. Not a bad guy. I don't have anything bad to say about him, but it was devastating to me.
Yeah.
Horribly devastating. I was just beside myself, didn't know what I was going to do. So like those things happened to me because I believed this kind of libertarian,
Hmm.
Protestant, wishy-washy Christianity of like, yeah, the Bible says, to wait until marriage, but that's negotiable. It was different times, like a lot of
Yeah.
bargaining. I did a
Hmm.
lot of bargaining with myself
Yeah.
as a young person. So as my life unraveled, right, in my early 20s, and I'm like, how am I ending up here? I'm not doing the party girl thing. I'm not being promiscuous. What is going on? I got married again, and similar thing happened with that guy. Now, he I got married to, and we had a child, and he still left. So it was like I had to look at this and go, okay, what's going on here? The only common denominator between these two men was me. They're total opposites of each other. I did different, took one approach with the first guy, a different approach with the second guy, and ended up in the same position. Why? Right. So I had to really look at myself, how I was thinking about the world, what things about me are attracting me to a certain type of guy,
Yeah.
those kind of things. And you have to look at your worldview. You have to look at, okay, what are my moral standards? And how did I end up here?
Yeah.
So that was kind of the beginning of me looking around and going, I don't think we're doing things in a very efficient manner. Like I had to bring my first daughter to daycare when she was like 3.5 weeks old so that I could go back to work. And I hated it.
Yeah.
I hated it. I cried. She cried. It was really upsetting. Suddenly I didn't give a crap about my job. I thought I liked my job, but when you have a baby and you want to raise your baby, you don't care about your stupid job. At least I did.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, like, why do I bring her to a different random woman who takes care of her all day doing what I want to do so that I can go work for this company, pay their taxes, pay the daycare provider? And I was like, who came up with this system? This
Yeah.
is so dumb. I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm young and I'm voicing this to the Christian conservative women around me, and they're all telling me this is how we do it now. This is normal. You'll get used to it. And I was like, I don't want to get used to it. This is stupid.
Yeah.
So I think that was like the starting point for me of going, why do we do things this way? And
Yeah.
over the years, I started like reading and looking into more and more like this women's liberation stuff, this feminism stuff, this idea that all the moms need to be working,
Yeah.
this idea that we can't, the model of dad working and providing for the family is somehow bad and oppressive, right? Because that's what you're told. So I just started kind of looking into that and reading, and I'm somebody that just likes to dig and go down rabbit holes, and that's what I did. And I found lots of crazy things. I start digging into the history and going, where did this come from, right? And I think I did something that most people don't do, and understandably so. I started reading the writings of feminists. Look, it's a dirty job. Somebody has to do it, right?
Yeah.
Nobody wants nobody wants to do this boring, dull homework of reading
Yeah.
feminist writing because it's just as awful as it sounds. It's as bad as you think. But I started finding this, first of all, that a lot of the history was wrong, like I said, that women did have a lot of rights, that women weren't the ones that demanded suffrage. This didn't come from women like we're told. It wasn't this grassroots groundswell of women who just, in the late 1800s, they looked around and they went, oh no, we're oppressed and we've had enough. And we're going to march until we get rights and we're going to demand it, but that's kind of the impression we're given.
Yeah.
And it turns out, like I started to find that there were anti-suffrage groups made up of women, and that those groups had more membership in them than anti-suffrage groups had. And I
Wow.
thought, that's interesting. So, well, why were they in an anti-suffrage group, and what was that about? So I started reading like their newspapers, their encyclicals, and they actually had debates. Believe it or not, there were debates between anti-suffragettes and suffragettes, women debating. I thought, first of all, I thought that women were chained to the stove and not allowed to talk in public, and
Yeah.
and that they couldn't do any of
Mhm.
these things. Yet here they are in the 1800s having, newspapers, having meetings, having organized groups, having public debates with each other. That doesn't really fit with the oppression narrative, huh?
Yeah.
What else is wrong? So I started digging further back and just found all of this historical evidence that's right there in these women's own words that they penned themselves, saying, look, we have a very privileged position under male suffrage, under patriarchy. We're actually the main benefactors under a patriarchy, not the men.
Yeah.
And they would write about the problems they could foresee with changing that. that they felt it would turn husbands and wives against each other, that a house divided couldn't stand,
Mhm.
that they would lose their moral high ground as a non-political group,
Mhm.
that they didn't want to be drafted, that they didn't want to be subject to a lot of the horrors and the dirty and difficult things that men do in the world on behalf of their wives and children. And I found that I just thought that their reasoning was very solid, very rational. It wasn't emotional.
Mhm.
And that the other side was actually very irrational and revolutionary minded. It was like this revolutionary spirit in
Mhm.
the feminist side. So I dig further into the feminist side and find that they openly thought of Lucifer as their liberator.
Oh my.
And they wrote
Wow.
about this. And these are women like Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Matilda Joslyn Gage, like some of the greats of the suffrage movement. And I
Wow.
found a book that's actually a PhD thesis by a professor in Stockholm named Per Faxneld, and you can buy his book on Amazon. He turned the thesis into a book. It's very big, it's very dense, and he's actually an occultist himself. So he writes about this
Uh,
from the view that it's cool and it was a good thing. However, he and I come to a lot of the same conclusions actually
mhm.
about it. And yes, these women thought they identified as Christians, okay, because they were like these radical reformer Protestants, but they
Mhm.
would say, actually, no, we think that the old Christianity, the Roman Catholics and the Orthodox, they got everything wrong. They're patriarchists, right?
Mhm.
So they didn't really give us the word of God. They gave us nonsense. And it's crazy because they're
Wow. Mhm.
very Gnostic, very Luciferian, and they saw Lucifer as the liberator of women. They rewrote the Bible from a feminist perspective. We're talking 1895, you guys.
Yeah.
1895, there's 38 women that get together and rewrite the Bible from a feminist perspective, take out all of the patriarchy stuff they don't like, take the blame of Eve in the garden completely away and place it all on Adam and the serpent. Just basically rewrote the Bible. Now,
Wow.
in 1895, this was so popular, it had several reprintings and was a bestseller, and you can still buy it right now on Amazon to this day, The Woman's Bible. And it was profoundly influential. Like a lot of you guys who, if you are still in a Protestant church, you probably have no idea how much this book influenced the Protestant churches in America from 1895 on.
Wow.
Incredibly important, and almost no one's ever heard of it. So it was just things like this that as I'm reading it, I'm going, wow, I got to put this out there. Like people deserve to know this. I wish
Mhm.
I had known this,
Yeah.
especially for Christian women. I think it's really important to know where these ideas come from, who propagated them. So the book goes into funding and like which groups pushed the ideology, how they got Americans and people in the West to accept it, and that sort of thing. And it goes all the way back to ancient times and like pagan occult worship,
Mhm.
witchcraft, and how feminism is like deeply, deeply rooted in that stuff too. Um, there's some people who get a little mad. I have a couple of
Yeah.
negative reviews from Protestants who feel I was very unfair, or even some
Mhm.
Catholics who feel I was very unfair.
Yeah.
But I invite people to check the source material to, critique the book if you
Yeah.
think that I'm wrong. And so far, I've actually had like lots of academics contact me and be like, wow, this is really crazy. Um,
Wow.
they approached the book hoping to debunk it and
Yeah.
found that actually I was correct. So
Wow.
it's done really well. It's gotten way more popular than I ever thought. I thought maybe my dad would read it, and
Yeah.
that's about it. But it's done really well, and I hope that it is changing the narrative and the thinking and breaking, because right now standpoint theory and women's studies departments have they're total gatekeepers of the history.
Mhm.
You will never hear anything about feminist history except what is filtered through a university women's studies department and the people who come out of those departments who basically have a stranglehold on the propaganda arm of feminism and telling you what they want you to know about it and not like the full history.
Yeah. And so when you bring this to people, do most people, it's kind of like a hard pill to swallow at first, like some of these feminists, like, oh wow, this is really bad. But then there's probably some of them that are say, "Oh, this is a good thing." Like the cult's great and everything.
I have a small following of witches who love my book because
Uh,
they think that I'm giving them the proper credit they deserve for women's liberation.
uh,
So yeah, there's a few of those. There's a few of them who think that, and there are a few people who get angry, but overall, it's been really well received. Overall, most people who read it are just like kind of mad that they just didn't know this stuff. They're like, why don't we ever hear any of this? Like
yeah.
I checked on your stuff and it's correct. How could it how could it be that we've gotten an opposite story of how this went down and where this came from? And like the last chapter of the book kind of goes over the results of this movement,
Mhm.
where it has gotten us. Like if you want to look at statistics and data about, women, children, families, fatherless homes,
Mhm.
how women are doing right now and things like that, it's hard to argue and say, oh, feminism was just broadly good, right? It's
Yeah.
the fruits of it are not good either. So mostly people read it and they're like, wow, thank you for writing this because this all makes sense now. Now I can kind of understand how we got here
Mhm.
and why things should probably change. Why where we are now is not sustainable and something should probably change. So
Yeah, definitely. So, what would your advice be for, a young woman besides obviously start with reading the book to kind of shape your worldview to understand why are things the way that they are. You have to go back in history just like we do when looking into the Orthodox Church. Go back in history and see, which church, Christ founded and which church is like true to those. So what other advice would you give to like a young woman, more conservative? Yeah, what would you?
I always say visit an Orthodox church because
Mhm.
that's where the proper worldview comes from, in my opinion. But if
Yeah.
let's say you're not going to do that, like I'm friends with Tim and Stephanie Gordon,
Hmm.
very devout traditional Roman Catholics who completely agree with me on all of this. They've written their own books.
Hmm.
We separately wrote books and came to these same conclusions
Yeah.
and found a lot of the same things. So they're not Orthodox, but they see all the same things that I see,
Hmm.
and they know that modernist feminist worldview is a disaster for people. So even if you're not going to be Orthodox, yes, read the book, but also, just think about this lie that as a woman, what makes you successful is to be like Taylor Swift or Beyonce or Kamala Harris or one of these, business minded career women who are competing with men and why that might not work for us. So, like women today in America, 26% of all adult women are on at least one prescription psychiatric drug.
Wow.
Alcoholism in women has risen since the 1970s when we started pushing women into university, pushing them into the workforce, telling them they're just like men. You need to hold yourself to this male standard and be like the men in your group. And you're a strong, independent woman. You can do anything a man can do, and you can
Yeah.
probably do it better.
Mhm.
But also, you can be a mom and a wife, and you're trying to cram all these things, be everything to everyone, do everything all at once. And so, alcoholism, prescription drug dependence, disordered drug use, uh, rates of anxiety, mental illness in women have all gone up. There's been
Yeah.
two like really broad ranging studies done on women's happiness since the 70s. Both of those found that it doesn't really matter what your socioeconomic status is, your education status, your marital status, like really across the board, women are very unhappy and they're struggling. They feel overwhelmed, stressed out, anxious, and kind of like they can't win no matter how much they can achieve.
Mhm.
So, why would that be the case? If women's liberation is so great, why
Yeah.
aren't women just like over the moon happy and super satisfied and content? When if you go back and look at surveys they did prior to that, like my grandma's generation, it wasn't that way. I
Mhm.
actually did an interview with my grandma on my channel where I asked her how because she's 98 years old, you
Yeah.
guys. So I asked her, like, how did you and your friends and your sister feel growing up in the 20s and 30s and 40s? Did you guys feel like second class citizens? Did you feel oppressed? Did you feel like there was some boot heel on your neck keeping you down. And she said, no, we never felt like that, especially during World War II when all the men are getting flown off to war.
Yeah.
We didn't feel oppressed. We felt very privileged. And they felt, cherished and taken care of, and like they mattered. And like having, if you had children and you were a good mom, that was like really venerated and respected. And so they didn't feel like it was so hard to win. They felt like you just be what a woman is, you be yourself as a woman, you do what women naturally do. And if you're a virtuous woman,
Hmm.
you're going to be well respected and appreciated by the people around you, and you're going to be fine. So I would say for modern women, it's like, just look at the people that are idolized. Look at Taylor Swift.
Hmm.
Look at Beyonce. All of the women in pop culture, they are hypersexualized. Their power comes from their sexuality. This is why even Jennifer Lopez and Cher, these women are in their 60s, 70s, and they're still trying to be sexy. They're
Yeah.
trying to be young and hot forever. Um, and just think about, if you think that's sustainable and going to work for the average woman who doesn't have access to millions of dollars of medical interventions and plastic surgery and all the stuff that those women do to keep that up, it's just wildly untenable, and it's really made most women very miserable and very unhappy. And worse than that, I would say, look at how children are growing up. Look at how kids are growing up now. They're in daycare or public school all day. Most of them, like 40% or more of children, are born out of wedlock. About half of them don't have their dad in the home,
Hmm.
uh, which creates a lot of economic instability. And basically, the public schools, which, if you guys haven't checked in on the public schools to see what's going on there, that's who's raising the children.
Hmm.
Church attendance is abysmally down. The Protestant church is practically dying off. Um, so obviously, we're like on this collision course with disaster. Birth rates are abysmally low. We've been well below replacement for
Hmm.
decades, even though most people commonly think that we still have an overpopulation problem.
Yeah.
Not true. So it's like, what are you as a woman? Are you this corporate cog in a wheel? Are you just a man in a skirt suit? Do you really want to live the first half of your life pursuing this dream only to have the second half of your life be your Chelsea handler, where you're just alone
Yeah.
ordering Thai food, you're smoking pot to cope, you're
Yeah.
taking a couple SSRIs, you're alone, and like your corporate job will replace you the minute that you retire or die,
Yeah.
and that's your life, right? It's not, if you want to have a legacy and an impact and you want meaning, this feminist ethos can't give you that, and it won't give you that. But Christianity, true Christianity, can and does give you that. And you'll have this holistic existence that is much more conducive to your nature as a woman, where you can be the matriarch of your sphere, you're the caretaker, you're very important. Nobody can replace you, right? As a
Yeah.
mother and a wife, you're not replaceable the way you are in the corporate, in a cubicle, right?
Hmm.
So that's kind of what I say is like, I think women are taught to really focus on that first half of their life, on trying to be attractive, get a degree, make your money, get your all your material stuff, right? Girls are very into like, oh, I got to get my lips done and my hair
Hmm.
done and my eyelashes and my eyebrows microbladed. At like the average girl now has like thousands of dollars of cosmetic upkeep.
Yeah.
It's
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 ridiculous.
super crazy. So
Yeah.
you're focusing on this plastic, like, um, projection of yourself as a woman, and you're in this competitive male sphere, and nobody tells women to think about the second half of their life. What are you going to do when you're no longer sexy and hot? What are you going to do when you're older and you need someone to help take care of you? Are you going to be like sustaining your life on your own in your 60s and 70s with no husband, no kids, no family? You're just kind of rootless. You don't have much meaning, and you might love your job. You
Hmm.
might have a job you love, but do you want to live to work?
Hmm.
Do you want to live just to work and then die? Probably not.
Yeah.
Um, so I just tell women to like think about those things, think about whether this is really going to make you happy. Look at some of these older childless women who will warn you and tell you. I get messages like this all the time too. I had a lady that said, "I'm sitting here reading your book. I'm 60 years old and I am just bawling. I'm just the pages are wet because I'm crying because I fell for this whole thing. Like I went to college in the 70s. I was part of the feminist movement. I divorced my husband because I felt he was holding me back and that my kids were a ball and chain. And now I'm 60 years old and I'm alone in my apartment and I don't know what I'm going to do. And it's too late for me." And those are crushing messages to get.
Yeah.
I don't want to see that happen to
Mhm.
women.
Yeah. And the great thing about Orthodoxy is we have all these great women saints too. Like these are really people that we should look up to because they lived holy lives that glorified God. I mean, the Theotokos, Mary, Mary Magdalene, all of these great, Mary of Egypt. There's all these great saints that
Yeah.
have so much wisdom that they are going to be remembered forever. They were mothers, they were martyrs. I mean, this is what men and women should both thrive for. But Orthodoxy really does it solves the problem for men and women because it gives
Yeah.
us salvation, but also gives us just going to church. You're going to have a great community. And right now, if you're a woman, the Orthodox Church has a lot of young male converts, and I've met so many amazing guys. And if you want a guy who like actually cares about you, who cares about faith in God, and like wants to have a family, the Orthodox Church is just an oasis for that in this crazy uh, modern world where lies are just running everything.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's one of the when I when I found orthodoxy, I was like really angry about Protestantism for a while.
Yeah,
I think sometimes it shows, and I don't mean Protestant people, you guys.
yeah,
I Most of my family, most of my friends are still Protestant, and I love them dearly, and I'm not saying they're not committed Christians or that they
hmm,
don't believe. They absolutely believe, right? I'm not saying that. I'm saying like this idea that we can just Bible alone. I don't really need a church. I can go if I want the community, if I want the fellowship, but really all I need is me and my Bible and I'll just study it, right?
yeah,
It robbed me of so much. So like my mother kind of abandoned our family and abandoned me and my kids and just made it clear that she had no interest in mothering or grandmothering. And she's really not been in my life for many years now. And I always feel like if I had known about the Theotokos, if I had had the
hmm,
saints,
yeah,
that would have been life changing for me. It would have been so beneficial for me to have, as a woman, these amazing martyrs and saints and the Queen of Heaven to look to for
yeah,
this female role. It would have
uh-huh,
been so good for me. And
hmm,
I think people are deprived of a lot when
hmm,
they don't have orthodoxy because it truly is the fullness of the faith. It gives you
exactly,
everything you need. It
yeah,
has the spiritual and physical healing that you need.
hmm,
It's got this holistic worldview that makes sense of everything. It
hmm,
gives you community. It gives you a sense of family. So if you're a
yeah,
person who doesn't have those things, like so many of us in this modern era don't have those things, that's where you can find it. And that's where it really comes from to begin with. So yeah, I really wish I would have known about orthodoxy when I was younger. I think my whole life would have been different.
yeah. Well, it all worked out in a providential way that because of
That's
your
true.
experiences, you're able to help thousands of other people. So, yeah, I think
That's true.
all this suffering, it ends up working out for the good. God makes good with whatever bad happens. But I think,
Yes.
yeah, I think this was a really fun interview. I'd love to do a part two sometime. My last question for you is just, what are your future plans? Do you plan to write any more books or just,
Oh, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. When I finished the first one, I was like, "I'm taking a break. I'm not gonna do anything for, like, 6 months," and that totally didn't happen. It was, like, 2
yeah,
weeks later, I'm already researching because it never ends. So there's a book 2 coming. It's actually pretty much done. I'm talking to publishers because
awesome,
self-publishing through Amazon is a nightmare.
yeah,
There's been formatting issues, there's been issues with the Kindle getting taken down and it's just a nightmare. Trying to do it on your own is pretty tough. So this book is done well enough that publishers are actually asking for another book. So I'm talking with a couple different ones. I'm going to see, what I think is best to do. And hopefully that will be out this year, I'm hoping. But it's kind of a sequel to the first one, and it's about the Marxist side of feminism and
Yeah.
feminism in Bolshevik Russia and the Eastern Bloc. Because if you think the Western history is wild, wait till you hear what was going on in these places, because it's
Yeah.
it's really insane. But it was a lot of the same entities, the same NGOs, the same money,
Hmm.
and really, I think a lot of the same spirits behind
Yes.
what happened there as well. And now that Marxist feminist is the predominant form of feminism in the United States, whereas before it was this like more liberal capitalist kind of
Hmm.
version.
Yeah.
So it goes over all of that, and it talks a lot about like how much this impacts people and they don't even know. There are really prominent Eastern figures from this movement that most people haven't heard of. Jay is now talking about Alexandra Kollontai, who is like one of the stars of the book. Because I was like, you got to look into her. She's really crazy. And he
Interesting.
was like, wow, yeah. And she's connected to all these she was insanely powerful, and people have never heard of her. So
Yeah.
it's going to cover all of that stuff. There's a lot of writing on my Substack. I'm going to do more of that this summer. And then just I mean, I'm still homeschooling kids. I still have 2 kids at home. The
Yeah.
older ones are moved
Aw.
out and on their own now, but I still have 2 at home. So I try to do as much as I can, but they always come first and Andrew always
Yeah.
comes first. But yeah, I think you're going to see another book, you're going to see more writing, a few more videos. And then of course, now that I've been on a couple of these larger podcasts, there's lots of
Yeah.
those that want to see me on, so I will get to them as I can when I
Yeah.
have time.
Yeah, that's really exciting. You've got your priorities in the right place. You're like you live in the dream life, getting to, raise your kids, be a great mother, and also spread a really good message, helping other young men and young women. So, thank you.
Yeah.
It's been really awesome to see you and Andrew grow so much. I'm really optimistic about the future of all of us, all this great community that we have. So, yeah.
Oh yeah, this like the Orthodox folks that I have met and become friends with through doing this, by far is like my favorite part of the whole thing.
Yeah.
Getting together with them sometimes in real life or doing
Yeah.
streams with them is like a really great community that we have. So super blessed for that. I mean, this has all been a huge blessing. Not that it
Yeah.
doesn't come with major challenges, it
Yeah.
does, but
Yeah.
we're very blessed and we have a fantastic church parish that we absolutely love. And to the extent that people support us, we try to support our parish in turn as well. So hopefully that continues and the Lord allows us to you know do great things to the extent that we can for the church that has given so much to us in just a short period of time.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, thank you so much. God bless.
Yeah, thanks for having me.